Welcome to Buena Vista University. I'm Morgan Kroll, and I study digital media here because I understand its importance in a world that is constantly changing. We rely on stories to connect us as humans, and learning how to tell those stories is what we do here.
I'm Tanner Frost, and I also study digital media. I'm one of our play-by-play broadcasters and reporters. Plus, I'm one of the football captains. I value hands-on experience that I receive here at BV and making lifelong relationships in the digital media field.
Let's start the DigiDay TV show taking a look at the visual future of media in the area of photography.
A few of our students from the new media class at Buena Vista had the opportunity to sit down with Emily Kenny, a BVU digital media alumna and photographer exploring the power of the image. Emily currently is a graduate student studying photojournalism at the SI Newhouse School of Public Communication at Syracuse University in New York. Emily and BVU digital media students explored how photography is changing media today, along with the art of the digital photo. Let's sit in on that conversation.
Hey Emily, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time. What role does photography play in new media?
So I think that now with like the development of phones and, a lot of cameras aren't really super expensive. Everyone can make photographs now. So I think that as far as media goes and being a professional photographer and working as a photojournalist, you really have to be more advanced in how you make pictures. And it can't just be like standard photographs anymore. Like there needs to be more nuance and more emotion in the photographs and stories. And I think that that's kind of what news publications are looking for now, is more like an extra level, a higher standard of photographs because so many people make them now. So they need to be held to a higher standard.
How did you become interested in photography in the first place?
I started taking pictures when I was like 13. They weren't very good, but I was taking pictures nonetheless. And I actually started doing it because of 4-H, and they had like a photography category in the county fair. So I really wanted to submit that. And then after that, I just kept doing it in high school. And then at BV, I did it for the TAC and, various things like classes and other people wanting portraits and things like that. And then I decided I wanted to learn more about it. So I am now at Newhouse.
Where do you see the future of photography going?
With the pandemic, I think a lot of editors have moved to hiring people that are based in specific locations where they need stories to be told. So if there's a story in the Midwest, they're going to hire someone in the Midwest. They're not going to fly someone from New York City to the Midwest and back because of all the coronavirus stuff going on. And I also think there's a big push for editors to hire the best person possible to tell stories. So for example, when the George Floyd incident happened, there was a push to get Black voices telling the story rather than white photographers. Because in the history of photography, there's been a lot of white people telling those stories when maybe they weren't the best people to tell those stories. Another thing I think too is that because of the pandemic, there's a lot of photographers that have turned their documenting skills inward. So instead of documenting other people and going out into the public, they've kind of been documenting their own experiences. There's a photographer from National Geographic who works as a nurse in Baltimore, and she's a photographer. So she photographed her experience as the nurse, which I think is really interesting because that's not really been something that a lot of people have done. It's been more like pushing your boundaries and your comfort zone and documenting other people.
Can you please explain what photography means to you?
Photography to me is really important, and I think it's a very powerful tool. It means documenting history, telling stories, and even sharing experiences that you might have experienced. Like I mentioned, it's turned inward. So I think that's a really powerful tool, and I think that because it's so powerful, it's really important to be aware and conscientious of your actions and how those actions might look when other people are viewing your work and how it might make the subject look. I think it's really important to work with empathy and be really understanding of other people and their situations. So for me, it really means having the power to document history and tell stories through images.
How has photography changed since you first started Emily?
I think in general, it's moved to being more nuanced and more to like elicit an emotional response rather than just being like, here's this person doing this, which what we call a verb photograph. It's just a picture of someone doing something. There's no like emotional response or like feeling to the image. So I think it's really moving towards being more nuanced and the story ideas are developed. It's changing, whereas there's a push to get more diverse voices and choosing the right person to tell a story. I think that's super important.
Thanks again, Emily, for taking the time for joining us. We appreciate it.
Buena Vista offers students opportunities to broadcast live on air through KBVU, our very own 24/7 alternative music radio station. Anyone can listen to 97.5 KBVU The Edge through live streaming as well as within a 50-mile radius of campus. KBVU's opportunities aren't only for digital media majors and are open to anyone on campus who is willing to learn how to produce content for any audience. Faculty and dedicated students are willing and eager to help anyone learn more about how a radio station works. One of our digital media students, Daniel Meisner, will give you a look inside the award-winning college radio station, where you can learn and grow as a digital media creator and storyteller.
Hello, I'm Daniel Meisner, co-sports director of KBVU, and this is Loggy Communications, home of digital media here at BVU. Today I'm going to show you a quick tour of our radio station, our podcast production room, and our editing Mac lab. Let's go on inside. Welcome to our radio station. This is where we air our radio broadcast, stream music to 97.5 KBVU The Edge, and where our creative ideas come to life here at BVU. Let's pop on over to the podcast room and see what's going on over there. This isn't the podcast room. Welcome to the prod room. This is where BVU students bring their creative ideas to life through podcasts and audio interviews. These Daniels are producing an audio production right now. This Daniel is preparing recording equipment, and this Daniel is uploading to SoundCloud. Hey Daniel, remember social distancing guidelines. One of us has to get out of here. Thanks for reminding me, Daniel. Let's head over to the Mac Lab, where we edit our audio productions. The Mac Lab is the center of technology here at BVU. You can shape your story through Adobe Audition, just like Zach here working on his new project. Here at KBVU, we are storytellers. We create quality audio content through our staff's unique skill sets. Everyone has a story. What's yours?
Now let's dive a little bit deeper into radio, podcasting, and the spoken word in new media.
Discussing the role of digital media in the world of radio is BVU alumnus Grant Gerlach, a reporter for Iowa Public Radio. Grant received his master's in mass communication at Miami University in Ohio, and he's been a morning radio show host, an agriculture reporter, and now is covering all types of stories for Iowa Public Radio. Grant discussed with members of the new media class how radio has changed in 2020, along with everything else.
Okay, thank you, Grant, for being here. We really appreciate it. We want to talk to you about new media and the radio. So I'll start with the first question. Is new media, such as streaming services like Spotify, important to your job?
Like, I work for an old media. I work for radio. It's been around for 100 years. But new media are tools that we can still use, because even though we're a radio network, we also have a website. We also send out news through email. We also have a social media presence. So we look at Twitter, Facebook, Spotify as tools that we can use, new platforms that we can use to reach new audiences or to reach our current audience in different ways and perhaps engage them even more. There are some podcasts that are through IPR that are using Spotify as one of the platforms that people can go listen to them. And, as we make our news stories every day, sure, we share them on the radio and our newscasts and things like that, but we're not just going to stop with that. We're also looking for other places to share them. So that those stories need to have a presence on social media, on our website, so that we can engage more people with those stories and hopefully build our audience and keep our audience at the same time.
What advantages or disadvantages does social media provide in your career, even when it's comes to reporting and news gathering, stuff like that?
It's an important place to keep track of what's going on and to share what you're up to, even though that's not the audience that we're necessarily counting the most, but it can be a way to engage people that can come to our website, which is an important audience to us, or maybe find us on air, and that's an important audience to us too. Because of that, I think that it mostly has upside for us, but there are some downsides to social media. And the one that worries me the most as a journalist, I think, is just the extent to the uh, to the extent that there's disinformation on social media, it harms um, journalism across the board, just undermining the trust people have in legitimate journalism. And so that's a serious problem and something that um, that I hope those platforms continue to address. And it's definitely something that news outlets like ours have to address too.
Do you think social media like Twitter, for instance, helps you come up with story ideas, or are you more cautious about using those ideas just because it is social media and you don't know what exactly is true and what exactly is false?
Yeah, it can definitely help come up with story ideas. I don't take it just at face value. If I see something that's interesting, I'll kind of check on who this person is. Do they really have the credentials to say what they're saying? Are they a real person, or are they just a bot of some kind that's putting information out there? And you can kind of check that out pretty easily, I think, just by looking at people's profiles. It's also a place that I'll just kind of post questions and do some crowdsourcing to ask what people think about things. And sometimes you can get good story ideas that way, or get an idea of how people are thinking about different issues. So yeah, it's a good place to check out story ideas, or to test them out a little bit.
Now, would you say that radio is dying, and what will replace it in the future?
I would say that radio is not dying, but there are some long-term problems that radio needs to address, or people in the radio industry need to be thinking about, because it's not really growing. The long-term trend is pretty flat overall. There's some usual kind of ups and downs in listening that we see, just sort of based on the election cycles. Typically, in a presidential election year like this, we see more listening, and then after that presidential election, it sort of falls off for a couple of years. The long-term issues are just that general trend line. I'm talking about like over 10 years or 15 years, where radio listening is flat. And that's a problem, especially when you look at these new media like social media platforms, or streaming, or smart speakers, that kind of thing, where use has just skyrocketed. It's grown exponentially. And so people in the radio industry can't just rely on their radio audience. They need to be involved in these different platforms, whichever ones they want to invest in, to try to create an audience, so that they still have an audience if that radio listening really does start to decline over time. So you can't just be stuck managing a dwindling radio audience. You want to be part of those other platforms so that you have a growing audience going forward.
Well, Grant, we appreciate your answers. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we end today?
When people think about these traditional media, they don't just exist on their own anymore. If you're in television or if you're in radio, you're not just in television or radio. You're involved in a lot of other things at the same time. So that means you have to have different skills at the same time as well. You know audio, but you need to know how to handle video or how to handle photos too. So it definitely makes it more challenging, but it's part of growing into a career.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you giving us time to talk today.
You're welcome.
Our next conversation is with BV Digital Media alumna Kylie Wellendorf, an education reporter for the Ames Tribune in Ames, Iowa. In her role, she covers all of Story County's school districts as well as news surrounding Iowa State University. Most of her coverage lately has been reporting on how schools, teachers, and students are adjusting to learning and living life during a global pandemic. Another group of students from the new media class talked to Kylie about the future of journalism, newspapers, and getting the story.
Welcome, everybody. Today we are interviewing Kylie Wellendorf about new media and journalism. First question I have for you is, new media is defined as digital media that is interactive, incorporates two-way communication, and involves some form of computing. Based on this definition, what do you think journalism's role is in moving new media forward?
As a journalist, especially this year, covering like the pandemic, caucus, the protests that have been going on, it's really important to, I would say, to have like a presence everywhere you go, as far as newspapers I hate to say it, print is going to go away, I believe, and it's going to move towards that digital realm. But the way that that happens is you have a presence on social media as far as Facebook, Twitter. A lot of my coworkers routinely report out meetings on Twitter. So I think it's having sort of that presence anywhere you can build that audience and continue to do so. And that's like where people are going to find success that way.
The next question, we just are wondering, user generated content is a lot more, prevalent now than it has been ever. I feel like it's going to play a big role in the future. Do you think that the integration of user generated content into news outlets is a risk to journalists' livelihood?
And that's a really good question. And I think that's, I actually just went to a virtual conference last week, and that's one of the things that they talked about is how every source you have, you're supposed to background everybody, even if it's somebody that's quoted once. So with using content, from other people outside of your newsroom, you kind of run that risk of putting someone on a spotlight where they might have like a, kind of a sketchy background, or they might be known for certain things. So I think in certain situations, it can be great. For example, in my beat, we use a lot of stuff from Iowa State University as far as their press releases, their stories that they send, and you'll kind of look for those good sources. But I think you have to do a little bit of vetting in order to make that work, because you just don't want to run that risk of, like I said, putting someone on the spotlight that probably shouldn't be there.
As the education reporter for the Ames Tribune, how have you adapted to the ever-evolving COVID-19 pandemic? Will that ability to adapt help the journalism field integrate new forms?
I think the biggest thing that people are looking for is in today's audience, what I'm finding is people want numbers and facts, but also anytime you can like complement a story with really good photojournalism, that's also super important. At one point, our newsroom talked about incorporating podcasts into our stories just because we wanted to reach kind of like that younger generation, because podcasts are becoming a lot more prevalent than they were, I think, in the past. And that's a really good way that people are kind of obtaining the news that way now. But I think like you just really have to be open. With a pandemic or with anything, especially in journalism, there's so much you have to continue to adapt for, because the way that people take in news is so different. So that kind of goes back to Twitter. A lot of the reporters that we have constantly are tweeting out things during press conferences, meetings, and I think that's how people pay attention, because people take in news so quickly. So yeah, I definitely think you have to have a digital media background. It's not just print anymore, it's kind of the whole package.
How do you think media, local media, will affect journalism 10 years from now, 5 years from now?
I think everything is going to keep changing. When I was in school, always loved the idea of writing for a newspaper forever, but I do feel like that's not going to be the case, and that's okay. I've kind of gotten past it, but I think people, um, going into journalism, and it's so awesome that you guys are in digital media, and it's a program that I'm really proud of because it teaches you so many different forms of journalism, and I think moving forward, like a lot of things are going to continue to move online. I think the use of podcasts and news reporting is going to grow. Video is obviously so important too when you're covering those breaking news events. A lot of video has been used in protest coverage. We did a story over the pandemic when nurses and doctors were protesting. People like stuff that they can see and take in quickly. And newspaper will still be there and print media will be there for those bigger stories, but like the hard hitting stuff that people want right now definitely will continue along that digital path, I think.
I think we're about out of time. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I just like so encourage you all to really take advantage of all of those different classes. When I was at BV, I was terrified of video and audio, and I just felt like I had no idea what I was doing. But now, like, I so wish I would have paid a little bit more attention maybe in those classes, because those are skills that are so useful. And there's so much you can do with all that stuff. So yeah, thank you again. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thank you. We really appreciate you being here with us, and Max and Javier, and just learning about new media and how it affects journalism. So,
For sure.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
The digital media program offers its own award-winning newspaper, The Tack Online, for aspiring journalists. If writing and reporting catches your interest, you can start working on the stories right here on campus. The first college newspaper to go fully online in the state of Iowa, The Tack is where readers can find loads of information on campus events, along with award-winning multimedia reporting, editorial, sports reporting, and special features on developing stories.
Digital media offers an array of opportunities for students to get hands-on experience. One of our working laboratories is our television studio, BVTV. The studio offers a vast array of positions that take place behind and in front of the camera in a single production. Let's show you how we like to get things done here at BVTV. Whether you're talent, an equipment operator, a director, or a producer, there's always something to do to be a part of BVTV. One of our strategic public relations students, Jordan Daggs Olson, is going to take us on a behind-the-scenes look.
Come on, let's go to logging. Okay, so I know you're new here, but don't be nervous. There are so many opportunities for you to explore at BVTV and in digital media. Check out some of our past students' work.
A local documentary, a campus news show, live sports productions, and a full-length film.
So as you can see, BVTV lets you create, imagine, and storytell. Experience it, and you could be our next great story. Let's hurry up. We need you for audio check.
At BVTV, you can start getting experience as soon as you arrive on campus. Work on industry quality equipment that help make behind the scenes magic. Maybe you can help us in our future productions. Learn how to work audio, control the cameras, or sit in the director's chair and call all the shots.
Quiet on the set!
Almost time for the show!
The best way to learn about television is in this interactive classroom. Learning how to operate the cameras are just the foundation for all that you can do with BVTV and digital media.
Okay, I'm gonna get you mic'd up here. Just sit up, stay calm. Let me hook this right here on your collar. Alright, thanks.
Are you excited? Yeah. You probably recognize me from TikTok, right? Yeah, I blew up pretty big earlier, and yeah, it's just been wild. I'm basically famous now.
Alright, we're live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I'm Hunter, and welcome back to BVTV Tonight.
To understand more about the future of television and streaming, a group of students from the new media class took the opportunity to talk with BVU alumnus and Hulu lead technician, Zach Schmidt. Zach graduated from Buena Vista in 2016 and participated in BVTV, KBVU, The Tack, Society of Collegiate Journalists, and created Capture It, the photography club. He is currently IT services lead at Hulu. The students discussed with Zach how streaming has changed the world of television and how it is able to stay relevant in a time where many more shows are able to be watched whenever and wherever.
Hello, Zach. Welcome to the interview, man. It's an honor to have you on this Zoom call to talk about the future of Hulu and the future of new media. We're starting getting to the interview questions here. For the first one, how has new media such as Hulu changed TV and movie services?
For a long time, we had a small amount of cable companies that basically ran the monopoly over how you would get access to content. And now we're at the point where we almost have, maybe over 20 different streaming services, and new ones are getting generated every day. And really that gives the power of choice, which I think is, to keep it tight, power of choice is really what has changed. Now you can choose what content you digest, how much you pay, how long you pay, and you can turn those things on and off like a water faucet.
Okay, next question for you, Zach. Hulu and other streaming services have the rights to specific TV shows. How do you go about solving content battles?
When you don't own the content or have the licensing for it, there's no, other than the power of negotiation, there's nothing you can do. So your best alternative is to produce engaging content that the viewers want to see and want to have. I think I'll use like The Mandalorian as an example, which I think drove a huge amount of people to Disney Plus. There's definitely a cult audience there that would be willing to subscribe to Disney Plus no matter what it had on it. But I think The Mandalorian guaranteed success there in the first few months.
I understand that you oversee and are in charge of on the onboarding program of new employees. What approach do you take to transition them into the expectations of Hulu and entering the new world of media?
We think big and we embrace fun. Those are two really important things that I express right away for every new employee. Our idea at Hulu is always to think as big as possible, not to think what is realistic, but to think one step past that of like what is unrealistic right now at this point, but could be realistic later. And then obviously to do that while embracing fun, having fun, I think our company as a whole does a lot of goofy and funny things. Our Hulu has live sports. If you've ever seen an advertisement for that, it's usually pretty ridiculous. I think we just did almost like a deep fake commercial recently that is pretty humorous. So yeah, those are the two big things that for anybody starting at Hulu, I try to emphasize right away, and it makes working at Hulu and makes working at new media a lot more interesting.
So what's the relationship between user-generated content and the economy of new media?
New media and mainstream media is still viewed as the next step. So when you have people that are famous YouTubers or you have famous Patreon members, they still are more than willing or more than excited to come on things like Jimmy Fallon, to be in a Hulu show or to create content for Hulu. So I think there's still definitely a connection there, right? It's still the next goal of, getting paid $1 million to have your content out there and shared with your own creative vision. So yeah, I think it's, some people would say that it's really the end goal, right? To have a show or have something produced that everyone can watch.
You might have answered this already, but it says Netflix has over 27 million subscribers, more than Hulu. How do you guys go about competing with other streaming services like that?
Yeah, naturally that is the question to be asked, like how are you competing? But at least someone that's worked internally with Hulu, that's never a question we're asking internally. It's always how are we bettering our product? How do we make a product that's reliable, consistent? You can look at the numbers, but when I like to use Amazon as an example. They were a bookstore at the beginning, but they didn't care about growth. They cared about creating a very, very solid platform. And now that platform, no one bats an eye at it. And I'm not talking specifically on media there as much as tech. And Hulu is a tech company. We're producing a streaming service and it requires a lot of developers, a lot of, man hours and women hours to get that stuff done. So I would say, the numbers are numbers, but ultimately it's all about longevity and producing a product that's going to stick around and be reliable.
We understand that you're a BV alum. How did BV and digital media kind of help you in your career at Hulu?
There are two different types of skills. There's the visual skills and how to use the camera and how to edit footage. But then there's also which I think is more important, the invisible skills that you learn, how to treat people with compassion, how to interact, how to negotiate for yourself. And in addition to that, how to create content that is interesting and that draws engagement. So as much as we did focus on the technical aspect, there's a lot of stuff that you'll walk away with that was like implied learning at BV. And I think you get that from the professors that are passionate, that care about the content, that you're producing. And I carry those things every day, and I carry a really great relationship with my professors still to this day that will kind of never ending provide like a support network if I did have questions or needed help pushing my content.
Nice, very good. Thank you, Zach, again for coming on this interview, man. I really look forward to Hulu becoming a big success later on in the future in new media. And, like I said, appreciate it, man. Have a nice day.
Intellectual property and copyrights are still important pieces in digital media storytelling. Sometimes we forget about how we own and use our creative works. What is the future of TV distribution in new media? BVU alum Courtney Kemp-Anders explains where distribution in new media is going. Courtney is the Vice President for Legal Affairs at Warner Brothers Television. Some of the students from the new media class asked Courtney how copyright and distribution rights are changing in a world where every form of media is getting easier to access.
All right, thank you for joining us today, Courtney. We appreciate you being here. So the first one we have is, as a new media professional, have you seen the new media evolve while you've worked in the industry, and how so?
I've been an attorney in television legal for 6 or 7 years,
And I've seen a big change just mostly in the sheer volume of distributors and new media platforms. When I first started in my department, which is Warner Brothers Television Legal, we were only producing one show for a new media distributor, and that was Netflix. And at this point, we produce, between 60 and 70 shows, and about 50% of our shows are produced for different new media distributors. So just the sheer volume has been the biggest evolution that I've seen. And also, I guess the other big evolution is just the distribution pattern. We've evolved from a week to week release of an episode like you're used to seeing on standard network television to more of a binge dump where all of the episodes for a season become available, day and date at the same time, available for the consumer. So those are the two biggest changes I've seen.
So the next question is, what does the term convergence mean to you, and how do you think it will influence television distribution?
The way that convergence applies to me would be, the merging of, the different distribution platforms. So whether that's new media or television, feature films, and comic books, really how the content is distributed and how, those things all play together. And I think a really good example would be DC Comics, which is the comic book arm of Warner Brothers. And, we have what we call internally or externally as well, called the DC universe. So the best example of the convergence is, let's say, a character like the Flash. So the Flash can exist, in all of the different media. It can, we could have a new media series based on that character, and we do have a television series based on that character. That character exists in feature films, and that character still exists in the original media, being the comic book. And the way that DC Comics has made that work is that they've created parallel universes. So all of those characters can exist and have their storylines, and they don't have to worry about having conflicts because there's this world that they've created that has these parallel universes. So, I think that that's a good example of how we've dealt with the convergence of the new media, of the different medias, and, practically applied it to make it work.
What changes do you see happening for digitalization, and how do you think it'll change content production?
One of the main things that it's really going to come down to is library content. You've got all of these competing places, and it really matters what you can rely on, because when we're producing content, for example, Fuller House for Netflix, we retain the copyright. And so at a certain point when our distribution deal is done, we get the show back and we can, redistribute it however we want. That is one of our library properties. We also, as Warner Brothers, have a lot of other library properties. I mentioned the DC universe before, and, the Harry Potter movies, and, Big Bang Theory, lots of, historic Friends, television series that we own the copyright to, so you'll see, or you've seen recently, for example, Friends is no longer on Netflix. That's because Warner Brothers' sister company has launched HBO Max, which is our, own digital platform, and we will be putting Friends on HBO Max. So you're going to see a lot of places pulling back their library content so that they can distribute it vertically rather than selling it. So that's another big change that I'm just a trend that I'm seeing and will continue. And we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting to see, because 10 years ago we were not even talking about new media, and in 10 years let's see who's still producing.
So more and more user-generated content is being produced every day. With the surge of production, do you see traditional TV and content from other platforms coexisting peacefully?
So, I do think that there is a world where that content and long form or short form professionally produced content can coexist. I really feel like they serve two different purposes. But at the end of the day, content is king, and people are going to look for the content that they want, whether that's something quick and user generated and fun, something that's gone viral, or they want to sit down and watch the 22-minute or the 60-minute episodic television, or if they want to find a happy medium, which is something like, Quibi's starting to do, which is the professionally produced content in quick bites. So, I think that right now, all of these things are coexisting because they serve such different purposes. And, once again, it's all going to be driven by the user, and user generated content is always going to be around. I don't see an end to user generated content. It just serves a very different purpose.
So unfortunately, it looks like that's all the time that we have for today, but thank you again so much for meeting with us, and we definitely learned a lot.
If you like to create your own radio show, produce a TV show, or write for the TAC, then this is a wonderful place for you to start. The digital media program at Buena Vista University is all about getting the story.
It empowers you to dive into your own storytelling in many ways, building on your strengths to create the best story possible while preparing you for an exciting career in digital media. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time at Buena Vista University.